Hi, I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and we're continuing to make these videos for the Earning Freedom Journal. If you are going into the prison system, or you have a loved one that's inside of the prison system, or you are an administrator of a jail or a prison, I really encourage you to take a look at our journals. The journals are something that anybody can use to maintain a high level of energy and live an intentional life, even if that person is locked inside of a prison. Now, as you can see on our YouTube channel, I go ahead and create videos that go along with the course, which you can visit. If you visit us at prisonprofessors.com, you will see a page of our daily journal because it's something I'm really passionate about. It's something that really helped to transform my life while I was in prison. I always recognized the importance of creating my own resources, and that is the subject of today's video. You see, leaders teach us that we can empower ourselves by being self-directed. And a journal, of course, is an incredible tool to help us stay focused and stay self-directed. I had to learn those lessons early, and in today's journal entry, I am going to tell you what I remember about the start. You see, when I first went to the penitentiary, when United States Marshals transferred me from the county jail in Washington State all the way across country to a federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia, more than a year had passed. I'd already been incarcerated for a year. So I had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to figure out what is going to be the best practice to get through this experience. And like anyone else, I would be responsible for the way that I responded to the situation at hand. I didn't like it. I did not like being in jail. I did not like being in prison. I was a young man doing without the things that keep young men alive. But what I did have was an ironclad will and an incredible 100% commitment to emerging successfully. That commitment was what gave me the strength to deal with all that I didn't like about my life. I could either complain about it or I could work to create my own resources to leverage growth opportunities. And that's the same thing that anybody else can do. You see, we all have choices. We have choices about whether we want to complain about a perceived unfairness or an injustice, or we could hope that things are going to get better. But in reality, hope is not a very good strategy. We should always recognize the power that comes from working to create new resources and then working to leverage those resources to creating new growth opportunities. Now, knowing that there would be an abundance of restrictions in my life, I had to always think about what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. And as I reflect back on those days at the very start of the journey, I realize that it's the same strategy that got me through those early years. It's the same strategy that got me through the middle years. It's the same strategy that got me through the latter years. And it's the same strategy that I am using right now today as I strive to build new businesses out here in the community. Now, at a basic level, any of us can work to develop some fundamental skills that will help us become more successful. And those skills are develop your communication skills, and we can also develop our critical thinking skills. When I used to teach these kinds of courses while I was in prison, I used to say, well, look around this room and find a resource that you can use to really liberate yourself. Get yourself out of prison. Make as much money as possible when you get out of prison or even while you're in here. What is that resource? And the resource that I would always point to would be a dictionary. You see, if you could take a dictionary and learn how to string those words together in the right way, with building the right sentences and the right paragraphs, you could influence the world to let you out of prison. And when you got out of prison, you could influence leaders to allow you to start a business. There are examples of that. The power of language is really incomprehensible. Sometimes you've heard that cliche that a pen is mightier than the sword. And there's real truth to that. You see, the people that really control the world are people that learn how to use language effectively. And so that is a skill I highly recommend to anybody that's going inside of a jail or a prison environment. By learning to communicate better and learning to think creatively, any of us can engineer a trajectory to succeed, a pathway to build a life of meaning and relevance and dignity. Those were the thoughts that were going through my mind as I hobbled off the bus that carried me to the penitentiary. I had shackles locked around my ankles. My hands were they locked behind? No, they were locked in front of me to a chain around my waist. And as I had to hobble my way up the bus's aisle and then go respond to the questions that a prison official asked me at the head of the bus, where he asked to identify myself, I answered his questions effectively. I hobbled off the bus, started my way to climb the stairs into the penitentiary. And I remember that once all the other prisoners were inside and the gates had locked us inside and staff members fingerprinted us and took our mug shots and processed us inside of the institution, I had to think about this 45-year prison term that I had to serve. And I knew that if I wanted to make it out of here with my dignity intact, I would have to find ways to grow stronger every single day. So I looked around that crowded holding cell, assessing the people around me and knowing that all of them looked older and harder than me. I mean, I was only 23 years old. So every choice that I made in there was going to influence how I matured and what opportunities would open. And so after being released from that holding cell and getting into my housing unit and settling in, I remember the first thing I did was walk to the library. Why did I go to the library? Well, I hoped to find resources that I could use to begin climbing my way out. You see, I really hated being in confinement, but I also knew I couldn't complain about it. I had to find a way to start building my ladder and climbing my way out. I understood that if I didn't get into trouble, I could earn 19 years worth of good time credits. And that meant I would be able to walk out of prison after 26 years when I would be 49 years old. And so when I walked into that library, I wondered what steps I could take to influence the life that I would lead once I got out. And so, I just tried to visualize the future. I knew that if I didn't create my own opportunities, I would not have any clothes when I got out of prison. I would not have any work experience when I got out of prison. I would not have any credit when I got out of prison. I would not have any money when I got out of prison. And so I had to start thinking about, well, what can I do to change that situation? And that's the same challenge that every one of us has to go through. We have to ask these types of Socratic questions that I put into the journal entry of today. For example, what steps can you start taking today to empower yourself as you confront the challenges ahead? How can you start working today to prepare for the challenges ahead, right? One is to figure out what steps can I take. Two, how are those steps going to prepare me for what I want to do? Those are the kinds of questions that help me to think differently. Now, there wasn't anything I could do about the crimes that I committed when I was 20 years old. The reality is, I sold cocaine. I put a group of people together to help me distribute that cocaine and transport that cocaine from South Florida to cities across the country, including where I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I couldn't change that past. But likewise, I couldn't do anything about the 45-year sentence that a judge decided to sentence me to, right? All I could do was figure out what choices am I going to make every single day. Complaining about unfairness or injustice would not help me in the least. We all have to choose how we are going to respond to challenges. We all have to choose how we can be resourceful. That's not only me, that's every single person. It's what I have to do right now as I'm building businesses. So I looked through the shelves of the library, searching for resources that would help me build not only mental strength, but emotional and spiritual and intellectual strength. I had to develop that mental athleticism that would allow me to look at a problem when things aren't going my way, figure out how do I go in a different direction. If I spent too much time perseverating on the sentence, I could lose myself with thoughts of what I lost. Now, how many of you know the word perseverating or know how to spell perseverating? Well, if you get the journal, that's one of the exercises that I always choose, is I use these kind of college SAT words, hoping that people go through the journal are going to focus on developing their vocabulary and their critical thinking skills. You see, I understood that was a resource that would make me stronger. I had to read biographies or profiles of other people that had triumphed over struggle. By reading their stories, I could build hope. I could build strength. I could stay motivated to learn. Reading stories about others who overcame challenges in their lives, that led me to believe that I could do the same. I remember reading the story about Malcolm X and how he educated himself from inside of a jail cell, how he trained himself to develop a vocabulary and build stronger communication skills. Now, I would never meet many of the people who influenced me, but they became my teachers in a self-directed path. They became the leaders from whom I would learn how to develop as a human being, even if I was locked inside of a high-security penitentiary. See, if I could grow as a human being, I believe that I could create meaning and relevance, even if I was going to be locked in there for multiple decades. That is how we train our mind to think differently and become resourceful. So, what resources can you create from where you are right now? That's a question that anybody can answer. And to the extent you start thinking about that, you will be surprised by the responses that you get just as you're staring at the wall and looking at opportunities. You could ask, what steps can you take to document the way that you created those resources? Because if you document the story, then it's not an accident. It's something that you engineered, and your ability to tell that story becomes an asset that you can leverage to open new opportunities. And so then here's another one. How will creating those resources advance your prospects for success? These are the questions that led me to go through 26 years in prison, motivated and filled with energy every single day. These are the questions that allowed me to come back to society with my dignity intact and start negotiating real estate transactions and income opportunities and business deals. These are the strategies that allowed me to get married when I still had 10 years of prison to go, and generate enough resources from inside of a prison to support my wife. All of that happens by developing a strong mindset, learning how to create resources out of nothing, and to build. And if you like these kind of videos, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Prison Professors program. I think that there's a bell you can ring, so you will be notified every time I produce a new video. But I basically produce a new video every single day because I never ask anybody to do anything that I am not doing. I encourage you to leave some comments in the show notes below. Support the program by not only subscribing to Prison Professors, but visit our website. Make sure that you visit the website of our sponsors at cbdtv.com. That's a business that I helped to found and launch for the specific reason of generating more resources to help teach and inspire more people who are living in captivity. That's the way that I strive to be the change in the world, and I hope that you will be a member of our community by subscribing to Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and I thank you for being a part of this community.